This is the first in a series of 9 short videos designed to help you learn to use the rubric for instructional development and effectiveness for teachers of students with visual impairments, otherwise known as the RIDE for TVIs. After watching this video, you'll know more about the reasons that the RIDE was developed and understand how it can be integrated into your evaluation system. You will also receive a basic overview of the RIDE. While watching this video, you may want to have a printed copy of the RIDE or an electronic copy on another screen. Or you can pause the video and switch windows on your computer to take a look at the various pieces of the RIDE as we discuss them. We'll begin by introducing ourselves and then talking more about how the RIDE was developed and its purpose. This video will end with an overview of the RIDE for TVIs and a discussion of the next videos in this series. I'm Dr. Rona Pogren, and I am the coordinator of the Program for Teachers of Students with Visual Impairments at Texas Tech University. And I actually was the creator of the RIDE, and will explain to you why I felt the need that this tool be added to our profession. I have been a teacher of students with visual impairments and an orientation and mobility specialist, and at Texas Tech for over 8 years, and been in the field a long time. And I'm happy to share this tool with you so that you can help us improve the teaching effectiveness of our TVIs. And Rebecca Sheffield, introduce yourself.
Okay. My name is Rebecca Sheffield. I recently defended my dissertation at Texas Tech University. I am in special education and in studies of for students with visual impairments. I have been a TVI, and I've also recently served as the university supervisor for Texas Tech for our internship students, and helped using the RIDE to do on-site and video-based evaluations. So I've been involved in some of the most recent planning and feedback on the RIDE, and I look forward to discussing it a little more with you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate Rebecca helping out with this webinar. So I want to start out the webinar by giving you a little background on the development of the rubric, and also want to let you know how much we appreciate your participation and your willingness to use the rubric to see if it is an effective tool for observing TVIs. Some of the background is that we were trying to figure out a better way to provide feedback to our interns. I know some people call interns practicums, experience. So whether it's practicum, an internship, or student teaching, whatever it's called, it's basically the final phase of training for TVIs, where they actually are out in the field and working with students with visual impairments. And in many cases, they may already be hired as a TVI, or maybe it's where you're under the supervision of another TVI working with that particular TVI's caseload. So we felt like all we had previously, at least in our program, was a checklist, and then we gave some feedback on the lesson observation. It was pretty open-ended and not too structured. But there really weren't any tools that were specifically designed for TVIs to provide that feedback. And as we began investigating all the different rubrics that were out there, if you've been in education lately, the rubric seems to be one of the big buzzwords that it was being used by a lot of states and by teacher evaluation processes. It's being used in teacher preparation programs and other areas of special education and in general education. So a variety of rubrics are out there that have been validated, have been tested and used. The problem that I found was that almost all of these that we looked at were focused on the classroom teacher. And many of the skills and the items that were on those rubrics really did not make sense and apply to a TVI, and particularly for an itinerant TVI, who typically works one-on-one or in small groups with students. And that's the service delivery model, as you know, that most of our TVIs work in, whether they're working one-on-one or doing collaboration and working one-on-one with students as well. So the RIDE is primarily focused on meeting the need of observing itinerant TVIs who are in training. But it could also be used for a classroom teacher. I've used it that way, who either had a resource room or who work in a classroom at a residential school. So it's really applicable for that population as well. I do want to mention that it's really geared to focus on lessons, instructional lessons. So it doesn't work as well with observing evaluations, such as a functional vision evaluation or learning media assessment or other ECC evaluations. It really wasn't designed for that purpose. It also doesn't work quite as effectively as just looking at TVI teaching a student directly as in a collaborative consultation kind of model where you might be, the TVI might be showing a classroom teacher and modeling something for another team member, or might be doing some collaboration in an inclusive setting. Parts of it would work, but probably not all of it. So just keep that in mind when you're selecting perhaps the lessons that you are going to observe the teacher candidate in. It would be important to try to find one that's an instructional lesson. There really was not an appropriate rubric out there, and that's why we came up with the idea of trying to develop a rubric that we could initially use in our own internship experiences for observation purposes, and then hopefully it could be used by other personnel preparation programs in our field as well. And there's also a potential that it could be part of a in-service teachers, a TVIs evaluation process, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. A rubric is basically a document that provides levels of proficiency and performance. And the purpose of using a rubric, such as the RIDE, is that we want to provide a new teacher or teacher in training feedback over time that will increase teacher effectiveness as they grow and develop as a professional in their profession. So if you ask what the purpose of a rubric is, it's basically a document that clearly defines expectations of performance. It provides levels of mastery of each component area. Within the field of visual impairment, there's currently not a rubric that provides these specific expectations in teaching mastery levels. So the RIDE for TVIs is targeted for teachers of students with visual impairments to provide this much needed feedback. And one of the most valuable parts that I've found in using this in the last several years with our interns is that it provides them somewhat of a blueprint when they're planning their lessons, and they're able to think about, oh, am I thinking about all of these aspects of what an effective lesson is, even before they're observed. So it has some pre-lesson planning value as well as feedback for post-lessons. As I said, it's particularly useful for observing itinerant TVIs since most rubrics were developed with the general ed classroom teacher in mind. So that is the difference in the focus. By providing supportive and clear feedback on teaching performance, the goal is that teaching effectiveness will improve over time. And that's really the purpose of having this tool. It's an evaluation tool, but the point is to provide feedback that's meaningful so that teachers can improve their performance. At this point in the webinar, we want to give an overview of the RIDE for TVIs, just so you're familiar with the different parts of it before we actually get into using it. We'll be filling it out and showing you how to do that in a little bit in a different video. So the top part of the rubric is really just some basic information. The date of the observation, who's doing the observation. That might be an on-site supervisor. It might be a master teacher. We call it a cooperating TVI. It might be a university supervisor. We also have representatives from the university who go out and observe our interns. So depending what it's called in a particular program, whoever's going to be providing the feedback of a lesson that's observed. Then you have the TVI, intern practicum student's name, the student's name who you're actually going to be teaching, and the student's grade level and age, and you could just put the first name. It's probably best not, to probably keep it de-identified or put initials or something like that. The school, the lesson location, the lesson topic, and that could be something really brief. It could be an introduction to JAWS, working on communication with the calendar system, teaching dressing skills, whatever the topic is for that lesson. And then the length of the lesson in minutes would be filled in probably at the end of the lessons, unless you absolutely know what that amount of time is. And then we're going to look down the left column. So the first column on the left has 8 different curriculum instructional skill areas. It's been broken up into these 8 areas. And these areas were determined to be the ones that were important for a TVI to consider in order to have an effective lesson. So the first big section, and we'll come back to the questions underneath each one in a minute, but the first large area is utilizing instructional time. And if you scroll down to the next page, the second area is communicating for student understanding. The third area is differentiating for individual, student, or group. The fourth area is TVI as a knowledgeable practitioner in the expanded core curriculum, ECC, and evidence-based practices, EBPs. The fifth area is learning environment to facilitate student success. The sixth area is integration of technology and tools. The seventh area is student-centered higher order thinking. And the eighth instructional area is working collaboratively with partnering educational team members. And if you think about some of these topics, they're not that different than what most other teachers would do in general or special education. We still want good time use, to communicate for student understanding. A lot of those items and skill areas would be similar. The ones that are probably a little bit more unique to our TVI role is understanding and teaching the ECC effectively and using technology and tools, just because so much of what we do is around assistive technology. And then collaboration, of course, is a huge piece of what we do as TVIs. But even within those categories, you'll see that there are some little bit more specific things that are unique to working on specific skills with our students. But these are the large areas that embrace what an effective lesson should include. If you go back to the top now, as we scroll up, let's look at the other parts. So we have the curriculum instructional areas along the left side, and then across the top we have the proficiency levels, and those are broken down into 5 levels. It can be highly effective, which is a 5, and this is the rating part of the rubric. It can be effective, which is a 3, or ineffective, which is a 1, or you can select 4 for rating between highly effective and effective, or 2 for rating between effective and ineffective. And then you'll see a column that says NA, and that's for not applicable category on the right side. And that one is there really just to be used very rarely in case there's something that is totally doesn't apply to this particular lesson, and that can happen sometimes. But if you think about it, most of the areas should apply to almost every lesson. And we've been using this now for several years and have found that, in fact, it almost does apply if you think about it a little bit differently in certain situations. So most of the time you would be choosing a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And then the far right of this columns, we have something called strengths of lesson and suggestions for improvement. I don't like to use the terms strengths and weaknesses. I like to use the suggestions for improvement as areas that you might be able to do a little bit better in next time. And this is a really, really important part of this tool, because if you just mark someone with a certain score under a column with a number by a question, they don't really get very specific feedback on what it is they did well, if they got a high number, or what they could have improved on. So it's just not very effective feedback to just give someone a score and a number. So it's really a combination of identifying where they are on this proficiency level scale, but also taking the time to write specific comments and notes. And we're going to get to that later in more detail of how to do that. So for each of those large 8 areas underneath, you'll see a series of questions. And the questions are going to be your guides. They will help you target and focus what it is that you're looking for. And as I said, will also help the teacher candidate target and focus what they need to be thinking about. Across the top, above the proficiency levels, there's a descriptor statement for each area, which provides information about what we believe are effective instructional practices in each area. For example, under utilizing instructional time, we have written a statement: TVI is organized, prepared, and efficient in utilizing instructional time. That would be an effective teacher and something you'd want to see around this topic. So you're going to think about this descriptor in relation to each question. For example, question 1, was the lesson well planned and organized? So you would think about that question and decide which rating of 1 to 5 to give based on the descriptor of effective instruction for area 1. TVI is organized, prepared, and efficient in utilizing instructional time. Are they highly efficient, Are they effective? Are they effective? Or are they not effective? You would choose a rating from highly effective to ineffective for that question. And this is what you would do throughout the entire rubric as you're filling it out. We've reached the end of our first video. Hopefully, you now have an understanding of why the ride for TVIs has been developed, the purposes for which it might be used as part of your evaluation process. You should also now have a basic understanding of some of the key features of the ride. Next video on this lesson, Curriculum and Instruction Skill Areas and Proficiency Levels, will provide more details about the rows and columns in the ride rubric and will show how the instructional skill areas relate to the proficiency level.